Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, clouds of all ages, welcome to the Sanctum Forecast. It's number 25. We've reached just shy of a quarter. This is absolutely amazing. I am your chief vibes officer, Eno. Very good to see all of you. It's been a very long time. And why are we here? Oh man, you know why we're here. Number one, we're here because we're here to talk about all things in the Sanctosphere, which includes the most bullish news over at Sanctum and the most delightful products that are being built. In fact, over at Breakpoint, we have a bunch of blockbuster announcements that I will not spoil here because I will get fired. But but rest assured, we have many, many delightful things in the pipeline, returning back to our roots, and I'm going to leave it at that. And of course, we're here to do it all with the most earnest Cloud fam. I do miss you guys. I can see folks that have been with us since the very, very beginning. Lucio, of course, has a very special place in my heart. GM Cloud fam, missed you guys. And then Giancarlo, GM, how are you, my friend? And Web3 Roy, a winner of many, many threads for the Sanctum Forecast. So thank you for always spreading the cloud gospel. And of course, we're here to celebrate together as one big family. Despite the fact that it seems that we've returned back into a bear market, that's okay, folks, because all you have to do is focus on the fundamentals, think long term, and everything else will take care of itself. Now, of course, we have a couple of house rules, and you know me, I always have to go through these rules. Number one, we'd love you to hype up the chat. Number two, we want you to think long term. If you're depressed with where we are right now, think contextually. Think about everything that's going on in the world, and don't worry about it so much. Just think about what we're building in the long term. Of course, we want you to be thoughtful and kind. So there's already plenty of spiciness on the timeline, and we can, endeavor to do better. And of course, we want you to have a good time, because if you're not having a good time, then why are we even here? So our agenda for today, of course, we're going to start with a big, warm welcome. But this time, it's not going to be a specific person. It's going to be a specific thing. And it's one of the biggest announcements that we've ever had in Sanctum history. Actually, in certain ways, it actually is the biggest announcement we've ever had in Sanctum history, maybe with the exception of Wonderland. Number two, and this is, the star of the show, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be INF. There have been so many upgrades, so many updates to INF. I myself have been learning quite a bit about how INF works, but of course we have real experts on today's show. I won't spoil it for you, but I promise you they are very distinguished guests that you know and love, who will walk us through everything that is going on in INF world, and of course what to expect next on the Sanctum calendar. So without further ado, we are going to start with the big warm welcome. And now, look, usually when we do a big warm welcome, we are inviting a specific person onto the show. But this time, we have Forward Soul, everybody. Holy shit. Forward Soul is the biggest LST that we have launched from day one. It currently has 1.73 million Soul staked. That is an absolutely mind-boggling figure. For context here, Forward Industries is literally the biggest DAT, digital asset treasury. It is based out of the United States. They have, interestingly, 6.9 million Soul, which doesn't feel like a coincidence to me. And they have entrusted Sanctum with not so small portion of their holdings in the form of Forward Soul. And of course, this provides all sorts of benefits for DATs, digital asset treasuries. It allows them to use their Soul holdings in Solana DeFi on-chain. Not only does that help them maximize their MNAV, but it also keeps them competitive because the DAT landscape has gotten very frothy these days. But yeah, that is a huge announcement from the Sanctum team announced today. The biggest single day LST that we have dropped. And we're looking for many more announcements like this. You might have, if you've been here since the beginning, you would know that we made this transition, admittedly a bit of an awkward transition, from a B2C company to a B2B company early this year, around January, February. And now that it's December, it feels a little poetic, actually, to have Forward Soul dropping because and it being like the biggest deal that we've negotiated throughout this year. It feels poetic because it feels like the trajectory of our year has truly landed on this moment, and right before Breakpoint as well. So I'd like to give a special thank you to our illustrious leaders, FP Lee, as well as Jay, who could not be here today because they're working on other stuff. But they are the ones who negotiated this deal with the Forward team. And obviously, the Forward Industries DAT has Kyle and the rest of the gang have been very gracious. We really appreciate Multicoin Capital for all that they do in the ecosystem, and also was trusting us with such a large portion of Sol. But anywho, without further ado, I'd like to move on to INF updates, and here is where we're going to have to do another big warm welcome with some very old friends, people who I've probably spent a little bit too much time with in Japan. We can talk about that a little bit, maybe. Of course, we'd like to bring onto the stage James Hanley the Manly, the chief whiteboard explainer and INF lead, and Alkeen, who disappeared for a second. Sanctum OG and INF Wizard. There's nobody on the team who is more OG than Alkine. Hey guys, how are you?
Matt, you were born for this. I love the energy, dude. Every forecast, I feel like I tell you this, and you were literally born for this. So good to be here. Very, very happy to have the energy.
Alkeen, where in the world are you? I feel like you've been traveling all over and like at the same time juggling all your work with INF, exploring caves, playing with spiders.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm in Cyprus now, but I was in French Guiana. Yeah.
Okay,
I see. To visit a friend.
Do you have superpowers now? Did you get bit by a radioactive spider?
I hope so, but no.
Well, I think a bit of context before we even just like jump into like some of the questions that we have, like why do we have this specific dynamic duo? Like for us, it's obvious, right? Because like we're on the team, we see everything that's going on internally, we know who's working with who. But actually, to the public, it's not like immediately obvious that you two work with each other a lot, like every day. And so actually, I'm gonna do a little rearrangement here. That's more like I like that better. That's a better arrangement. Okay, so so we have James, and Alkine. They've been working with each other for a number of months now, and I'd love for you to just tell the Sanctum Cloud fam and everybody who's watching, like, what's the relationship like? What are you guys cooking? What do you guys think about every day? James, you want to start?
Sure. So I joined Sanctum a few months ago, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, but probably not. Shortly after I joined, FP actually said to me, much to my surprise, he said, "I want you to be the product lead for INF." And I was actually quite shocked by this because I didn't really know too much about INF before he asked me to do this. I'd helped out with some strategy stuff prior to this. I'd also helped out with the quarterly reports and a number of other initiatives at Sanctum, but sort of INF was the last thing I expected him to say. And so I said, okay, great. Time for me to learn everything I can about INF, drink from that fire hydrant. And as it turns out, Alkine here has actually been, I like to call him Alkine Soul internally, because Alkine Soul is actually the brains behind INF. So Alkine has actually been operating INF for, 2 years now or something like that. And has really been the driving force internally at Sanctum, not only in how INF is managed and operated, but as well as making decisions around sort of like, what to do with INF. So I guess that's the marriage of the two of us. I've come in and I've asked Alkine a lot of questions, very quickly gotten up to speed. And since joining, I've sort of been responsible for setting the vision for INF. So what we're going to do with it, what strategic importance that has for Sanctum and our partners, and how we can basically make INF better. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Alkine cannot take a compliment to save his life. I think he's goddamn allergic. Like every single time you say like great job on INF and all the things that you're doing, he's like, oh no, I get too much credit for it. I'm all like, come on, man. It's like you literally have been running the show for the last couple of years. And speaking of which, Alkine, I know that you're allergic to compliments, but how would you describe the last couple of years in terms of like where you see INF now versus like where it was previously?
So as James said, before he joined, I was keeping all the knowledge to like for myself, and so now I'm very happy to share it. Um, and so no, but Han was really, so Han is the CTO of Sanctum, so he's like the lead engineer, and he's actually the brain behind INF. But we are with James, we work every day to make it better. And by better, I means we try to like optimize, and what we have in mind is just making it like a better product for LPs. So if you have INF in your wallet, in DeFi, basically we try to get the best deal for you. And so I mean, it's very easy. In a few years, we just want INF to, right now it is the best place to park your soul, and so we just want it to remain like this.
There's this one kind of thing I noticed about Alkine, and I actually learned it about him in Dubai. He's very humble, but he has a weird pride about certain things, right? Like there are certain things that just like lines that cannot be crossed, right? Rubicons that cannot be crossed. And one of them, like it's like Alkine demands the best yield. It can't be anything but the best yield, and anything that threatens best yield, just like he gets a little kind of nutso.
Which is why he's perfect for INF.
Yeah, he's like super nice, but like weirdly aggressive about the yield. You start talking about the yield, and like, and how I actually
when I was working like very actively on INF, I was actually dreaming of like INF. So I mean, this is expected, of course, when you spend a lot of your day working on something. That's just like the logic, like continuation, I guess. Logical continuation. I don't know, but yeah.
But I mean, the how I found this out, James, was I went to a noodle lunch with our significant others, and for some reason Albert was there. I have no idea why Albert.
Third wheel.
But then I had met Alkine's significant other, and then I was like, how is he at home? Like, what's he's like? What's his attitude like? And she's like, well, sometimes he's just so full of himself, and I couldn't help but thinking it was specifically INF. It's like everything else super humble, but INF, he's like, oh yeah, I'm the shit. Oh yeah, I could see Alkine looking in the mirror in the morning and be like, oh yeah, that yield, number one.
Which, if you're an INF holder, is exactly what you want. So it's a very good story for those people on the live stream right now, if you're an INF holder.
All right. Well, you know what? Enough fluffery. We're going to get down to substance because that's what we're here for, folks. The one thing that we want to talk about. And I know that there are people in the Sanctosphere in the Sanctum universe who have probably heard what INF is a million times, but they've never really stopped to think about it. I know this because I used to be one of these people. Before I joined Sanctum, I had heard of INF. I knew what INF was roughly, but like I never really stopped to think about what actually is INF, right? And so like I'd love to break that down a little bit, right? So this right here is a breakdown more of like the yield that comes from INF. But still would love to get, a broad strokes accounting of, number one question, what actually is INF?
I'm happy to take that one.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So I used to think before I joined Sanctum that INF was an LST. What I realized is INF is actually like an LST of LSTs. So an LST, like Dupe Sol or Forward Sol, it basically is this thing called a stake pool. And within that stake pool, it's got little bits of Sol that are staked in things called stake accounts. And that's how it earns the yield from the network. But INF, on the other hand, instead of holding little stake accounts in a stake pool, it actually is this big thing that holds a bunch of different LSTs within it. So it earns its yield from the LSTs that it holds onto. And there's also another bit, which is like the trading fees, and that's something that we can explore separately. But I guess in summary, INF is like an LST of LSTs.
Would you object to other mental models like index or even like an ETF? Like in many ways, they are not indexes, they are not ETFs. But I mean, just from the perspective of like aggregation, right?
Yeah.
Or like trying to find the best yielding, bundles. Alkine, do you object to that? Or James, do you object to that kind of mental model or framing?
I'm quite opinionated on this, but you go, Alkine, and then I'll share mine.
No, I think we've been describing INF as more like a strategy on top of your soul, or like on top of LSTs maybe. And this would be a more like correct description of what INF is. I don't think there is any analogy actually. Maybe James, you have an idea.
Okay, so when I joined, an FP said, I want you to look after INF. And I started doing this big internal document of like what INF is and kind of exploring everything for myself. And one of the things I wrote was that INF is like the S&P 500 of LSTs. That was like a useful little analogy that worked for me. And FP commented back, he's like, I hate this. That was like basically his comment. So we basically had this like conversation, argument about it. And essentially his argument was why it doesn't make sense is because an ETF, the S&P 500, the index, it's sort of like this average. It's this bland average thing. So it gets the returns, the average of the things that it holds. But INF is actually really unique in that it gets more than the average. And that's like this magical swapping trading component, which is something that we can talk about separately. But the most simplest way to imagine INF is kind of like an ETF of LSTs. But the truth of the matter is it's actually like the S&P 500 of LSTs on steroids. And the steroid component is something that we can talk about separately. But it is a useful metaphor to kind of like imagine it.
Yeah, I think as I guess conceptually at first it might be useful to describe it as an ETF or S&P 500, but the point that you're making is that like I don't know, an ETF gives you an exposure to an entire industry, let's say, right? And that exposure is just broad base. It's not optimized for anything specific aside from exposure to that specific industry. And so what that care and intention that FP really wants in the description, and I think where Alkine is getting at when he says strategy, is that, and as you've put it, it's supercharged, right? So Alkine, though, like, why do you think of it as like a strategy, though, right? Like because when I think of strategy, I don't know, what does that invoke in me? I don't know. I guess strategy kind of invokes, I don't know, almost like maybe like a concept, almost like delta neutral. Like I'm getting this is like a delta or a hedged position. So when you think strategy, like what associations are you making in your head when you use that term?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm purely referring to the concept of strategy in DeFi, where it can be anything really that just like gets you yield. So like yield farming is a strategy. Just having sold in an LST is a strategy technically. And so INF is a strategy, but it's basically built on top of LSTs, and I guess you could say on top of Sol as well, because it can be like a basket of all like these different LSTs as well as Sol. And so yeah, it's actually very unique and complex to grasp.
I see.
Can I just jump in there actually? So you were talking, about the S&P 500, that kind of a metaphor, it being this basket of stocks, but LSTs in this case. What's interesting and where it's different to that, which is what FP was trying to point out, is that with the S&P 500, that is fixed. No one can come and take one of the shares out from one of the companies within that basket. That's like this set basket that no one can touch. The managers of that basket can adjust they can sell one and buy another, and they can do that rebalancing. But nobody from outside can touch what's inside. That's where INF is different. With INF, it is a basket of these LSTs, like the S&P 500 is a basket of stocks, but anyone can come along and they can buy from INF one of the LSTs that it holds for either Sol or another LST that they hold. And when they do that, INF charges them a small fee for that service. And that fee for allowing that swap to occur is where the extra returns like well above the average that the supercharged part actually comes from. So really the difference is it's this ability to swap assets within it, and anyone can trade with INF, not just trading INF, but trading with INF. That's the unique part.
Yeah. Actually, now that we're talking about a little bit of what makes INF unique, and of course we're going to get into like how does it actually work. My favorite analogy for INF, the lemonade stand. But first, like let's just focus on this graphic for just a second, right? I'm gonna make this a little bit larger for our audience here. And so what I'd love people to focus on is the segmentation between, let's say, inflation, MEV, and block rewards versus trading fees, right? So actually, James, could you walk us through this, like just the very basics of the? I mean, just imagine a layman audience, right? Like, how would you describe the distinction between the trading fees that you just talked about versus, let's say, the yield that you get from inflation or MEV or block rewards?
Yeah. So first thing I'd say is these numbers are very out of date. So this is quite an old screenshot.
Yes.
The numbers look very different today than when this was made. So basically, a liquid staking token on Solana, it essentially has three sources of revenue. So forward sol, dupe sol, any of the LSTs that you might hold, they basically have these three sources of revenue. One is the inflation from the network. So there's currently a big discussion around the inflation rate of the network. If you're on crypto Twitter, you'd know this. And so that's the inflation portion on the left. So there's that bit. That's coming from new sol being created by the network for building the blocks and adding them to the blockchain of the network. So that's new inflation. Then there's MEV. This is basically like the one who's getting the rights to add the block to the blockchain. You can arrange the order of the transactions in that block, and the way in which you arrange them, you can sort of squeeze a little bit of margin from arranging them in certain ways. That's called MEV. So that means the LSTs get a little bit from inflation, they get a little bit from MEV, and then block rewards is when the network's really busy and people are trying to get their transaction through, they might increase the fee that they pay to try and get their transaction to land. Well, that's the block rewards from people who are, you go to Phantom and you go to Jupiter or Camino or whatnot. You sign your transaction to do something, you pay a small priority fee, and that's the bit that goes into the block rewards here. So all three of these sort of combine, and that's the total revenue that the LST makes. But like we talked about with INF, there's that extra bit on the end.
Well, yeah, I mean, and just to clarify even one more thing here, right? It's not like the inflation rewards, MEV, and block rewards are coming from a single LST, right? Like that's just not true. It's coming. It's like a average of the all the LSTs that are included in INF. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So each of the LST is going to be earning inflation, some MEV, some block rewards. And because INF is just holding a bunch of LSTs, it means that's what it's earning. It's earning all three sources of revenue there from the LSTs that it holds. But in addition, anyone is able to swap LSTs with INF, and that earns this extra trading fee component, which you can see on the right.
Yeah, right. And Alkine, could you remind me what we're charging for trading fees between LST to LST? Is it like 10 bips?
Oh, James, do you want to take that one, or it depends. The TLDR is just it depends. It's very it's very LST specific. So
sure, please.
It's very specific to the LST. Well, we actually were planning to talk about this a little bit later, but we could do it now.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Alkine's not going to take it.
All right,
so okay, or maybe there's a lag. Sorry, you go.
No, it's I don't know. Well, so it depends. It depends on basically if the LST was issued by Sanctum or if it wasn't. To maximize the yield for LPs, all LSTs from Solana are allowed to be swapped through INF. So INF is Infinity, it's like the same. It's like the DEX, so our DEX. Because INF is the token that you get for depositing funds into Infinity, basically. Just like you would get an LP token for creating a position on any AMM. And so through Infinity, you get different fees if you're swapping an LST that was issued by Sanctum, what we call the Sanctum LST, or if you're swapping, for example, Jido Sol, MSol, or any of the non-Sanctum LSTs. And so Sanctum partners, or like users of partners LSTs, they will get preferential rates when swapping their LST.
Right. And I actually brought this slide up, which is INF's magic sauce, the LST lemonade stand. A really, really useful mental model written, of course, by James Hanley the Manly, Mr. INF. And he uses this to kind of describe how INF fees work, which I think ties into this discussion. So, James, you actually want to, and you can scan this QR code, by the way. I really encourage the audience, if you want to learn more about INF's fee structure and just INF in general, right? This is a great way to learn without getting a headache. So, James, you want to walk us through this analogy here?
Absolutely. So this is the lemonade stand is my response to FP telling me he absolutely hated the S&P 500 analogy. So this is where I landed. And so let me explain. So imagine instead of INF as this big basket of LSTs, you could imagine that INF is a lemonade stand, but on the lemonade stand, instead of lemonade, it's just different LSTs. There's a guy who's standing behind that lemonade stand you can see here. That's Alkyne, okay? So there's Alkyne standing behind the lemonade stand. He's got a table in front of him, and there's all these different LSTs on it. Well, you could call the table INF, okay? And so what can happen is anyone can walk up to Alkyne and the lemonade stand, and they can say, hey, Alkyne, I have dupe sol in my pocket. I can see that you have forward sol on your table. I would like to grab some forward sol from you. And so what Alkyne does is he looks at his clipboard, and on his clipboard is where he has all the prices of the fees that he's willing to take to accept Jupiter Sol, and how much he's willing to give in terms of a fee forward sol to somebody who trades with him. And so he looks at the clipboard and he adds up the two numbers, and then he says, okay, sure, I will take your dupe sol, but I'm going to give you back forward sol minus this little fee. Okay, so he's going to add the two numbers together, and that's the fee that he's going to charge them. And so what happens is they shake hands, and the person who walked up to the stand, they take the forward sol, and Alkyne has now got dupe sol, and his lemonade stand has just changed. So it's maintained its value because what he's done is he's made sure that the amount of the amount of forward sol that he gave them is slightly less in value than the dupe sol that they gave to him. And so that's the fee part, right? And so what has happened is the user is happy because they walk away and they've got the LST they wanted, which is forward sol. They might have paid, say, 10 bips hypothetically, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And Mr. INF Alkyne here is very happy because the total value of his lemonade stand has increased by 10 bips of that exchange. And that's the trading fee part, is the total amount of sol on his table has actually slightly increased when that swap occurred. And that's how INF sort of swapping and fees are applied.
Right. I see. And so is it useful to kind of think of different LSTs as having almost different weights per gram? I know this is completely unrelated, but it's
actually,
almost like...
I was gonna say this because there is a missing piece for the explanation, because you may say, okay, but all the LSTs have like different exchange rates, what we call like redemption values. So like how much you can exchange them for sol. And so yes, by introducing like a concept of maybe weights, you could say that maybe an LST that is older most of the time will weigh more than like forward sol that was just launched. And so you could have like a scale on the table as well, and you could like weigh the different LSTs. So like the one that comes in and the other one that gets out of INF. And so this will also like gives you the actual like ratio, like trading ratio, because of course there is the fee part, but there is also like the sol value part. But yeah, this is
and the technical name for this is called the sol value calculator. It's part of the INF program. And that's what it does.
Actually, so this was also something I embarrassingly didn't know until I came to Sanctum, which is like, even the base concept of an LST itself and how Alkine describes it is like as the fruit gets older, like obviously it's going to weigh more over time.
Yep.
It's that in soul denomination, so soul terms like soul over soul. If you hold an LST, you are always winning in soul denomination, meaning
Yep.
that like you are always your soul is always appreciating, right? What
Yep.
the dollar amount value, what the euro value, what the dirham value, what the rupee value of that soul is completely it's different separate question, right? But if we're talking about just the fruit itself, I mean it's like the fruit doesn't earn weight in gold, the fruit earns more weight in fruit. It's like it just makes sense. It's like your LST accrues more value in soul, right? So it's like
Exactly.
if you put in 1 and then you had 10% yield in a year, keep it simple, then you could reasonably expect 1.1 soul back, right? Does that mean that that's going to be worth more than what you purchased the 1 soul for? Separate question. But depends on if we're in a bull or a bear market.
I think the one caveat to this is, you can't necessarily trust all liquid staking tokens. So why I say this is not to be controversial, but it's that it is true in principle that for a Sanctum LST, if you held it, you could expect reasonably that it would continue to accrue in soul values. But if you held some other LST that may not be a Sanctum LST, for example, there is a possibility that the issuer of that LST increases the fee such that they then take all the returns from the stake pool, and then your soul value doesn't actually continue to grow. So I guess that's one of the benefits is when you're holding INF, we're monitoring that sort of thing for you to make sure that the LSTs within the basket aren't increasing the fees on you so that you're missing out basically because they're taking it for themselves. That is something that could happen.
Yeah. Actually, there's this one question I want to ask Alkine desperately, which is James has been telling us this story while you've been away that you've been like waking up at like 5 a.m. every few days to rebalance. What
Every
is he
2
talking
days. Every 2
Okay,
days.
what is he talking like? Because you never talk about yourself. So what is he talking about?
So this is, I guess, pretty embarrassing from like an operational view, like standpoints. But basically, before we automated, like everything like INF depends on a lot of manual action, I guess you could say, and so we automated most of them, but most of them have been like automated pretty recently. And so back then, when most of what we should do was not automated, I had to wake up whenever the epoch was about to end to do the rebalancing. And so I guess James can explain what rebalancing achieves. But basically, it makes sure, that there is enough soul for like there is a deep enough liquidity in INF for you to sell your LST for any of the assets that INF supports, and most of the time it's for soul. But yeah, I was waking up very early in the morning or sleeping very late. Depends on how you want to see see things. But yeah, and that was a problem because the for some reason before it was so like the epoch time of so Solana has like 2-day epochs. It's roughly 2 days, but sometimes it's either like a bit less or a bit more. And so it used to be a bit less, and so it used to be the epoch would end at maybe like 3 p.m. and it slowly went like backwards. Yeah, I don't know if you could say. And so it ended up being 5 a.m. But for some reason, once we reached 5 a.m., it started being like exactly 2 days. And so that means I had to wake at 5 a.m. like every 2 days forever, I guess. I don't know. And so we had to make this. It was a pain in the ass. But yeah, it's yeah.
Oh God, what's that? Is it Sisyphus, the man who's condemned to roll a boulder up the mountain forever, and then he gets to the mountaintop, and then the boulder crumbles, and he has to go back to the base of the mountain. And okay, so we have literally crypto Sisyphus here. But actually, what you just talked about is also something that's not obvious to people based on our current description of INF. So far, folks, you've heard of INF described as a strategy. A less preferred mental model is S&P 500. What's missing from that explanation, of course, is that an S&P 500 is kind of a lame average, as opposed to something that's actively managed and meant to give you the best yield. We've also heard about INF in the context of the lemonade stand, and perhaps with different lemons of different weights that you can exchange for an exchange rate, exchange fee. But based on all those descriptions, what's missing from this explanation is the soul component, and I'm talking about raw soul, right? And some people just might not be aware why. So even though they understand that Alkine was waking up at 5 a.m. and like having to, check how deep the soul liquidity is, what is he talking about, James? Like, why does Alkine have to wake up at 5 a.m. and check how deep and what does he even mean soul in INF? I thought you just said that INF was a lemonade stand full of LSTs. So what are you talking about, Mr. INF?
Well, if you see my lemonade stand, I drew one of the lemonades on the stand as orange instead of blue. That one represents the soul part, which is the bit we're about to talk about. So I was very intentional about that. All right, let me explain here. Okay, so in Solana, there are these things called epochs, and the epochs last around 2 days, like we've talked about. And at the end of the epoch is when all of the staking rewards from the inflation of the network, blah, 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 when all of that gets distributed to the validators on the network. So that happens every 2 days at the epoch boundary. We can't change this. This is like how the network of Solana works, okay? And so what that means is if I want to unstake from a validator with an LST, for example, I have to wait until the epoch ends to actually get that stake back from that stake account that was there to be no longer a staked version of Sol, but now unstaked Sol. So when you go to, Kraken or Binance or whatever exchange you might use, Coinbase, and you buy Sol, you're actually buying unstaked Sol. So it's not earning you any yield from the network and, all the things we talked about. It's basically just not earning for you. But when you stake that Sol, that's when you start earning. And that's what LSTs do. LSTs stake that Sol behind the LST so that you can still use it, but it's also earning for you at the same time. So it's kind of like abstracted away. It's hidden away from you, right? Well, INF is solving one of our biggest problems for our partners. So Sanctum's core business was built around liquid staking tokens. So you've heard of Dupe Sol, that's one of our LSTs. You've heard of Drift Sol, potentially another one of our LSTs. A bunch of the LSTs on Solana, they're actually Sanctum LSTs that we've launched for our partners. The problem is though, when we launch an LST for our partner, sometimes their users what their users will do is they can deposit Sol in to get the LST, but sometimes they want to convert it back to Sol. For whatever reason, maybe they have to sell, maybe they have to do something. So they'll want to convert back to Sol. The problem is though, there's not always Sol available for them to swap that LST back to Sol to. And that's what INF solves. So the orange part on this diagram here is the Sol, the unstaked Sol part that always sits in INF. So what we do every epoch, and what Alkine was doing at 5 a.m, is what we would do is we would wait until the end of the epoch. So right before the epoch boundary, we would see how much unstaked Sol was in INF. And if there wasn't much left, or it was zero because it's all been used up, then what we would have to do is we would have to unstake from some of the LSTs that INF holds to get Sol for the next epoch. So that for 2 more days, when people want to go to Jupiter and swap their Dupe Sol to Sol, there would be some Dupe Sol to Sol swap venue on the network somewhere to do that swap. So that's actually the bulk of the swapping that INF facilitates. It's from our partners' LSTs as well as non-partners to Sol. Because if I want to deposit Sol to get an LST, I can do that directly with the stake pool. But if I want to swap my LST back for Sol instantly, I need someone willing to give me that swap somewhere. And for a lot of LSTs, it's actually quite rare. There's not a lot of swap venues. That's the core problem that INF solves for. Any LST can be deposited into INF to withdraw unstaked SOL out. And what we do every 2 days at 5 a.m., now automated, thank you, Alkine, is we do that unstaking. So there's always some SOL every epoch for people to do those swaps.
So then, Alkine, my follow-up question to James's explanation, thank you so much for that, James, is how were you at that time determining what was deep enough, like enough SOL? Because that feels a bit arbitrary to me, right? But I'm sure that I'm sure it is in some ways arbitrary, and in some ways not, right? So like obviously if you have a partner that's reaching out to you, and let's take retired Chad Dev as an example, right? And he's like, I'm trying to unwind $100 million Jupe Sol position. You have enough SOL? That's not so ambiguous. You know exactly what that man needs, and you need to unstake the requisite amount in order to make that happen, right? But in other cases, are you looking at market conditions? Are you looking at kind of like what SOL to LST swap volume is looking like in the last epoch? I'm just curious, like, how are you trying to juggle this like very complex question of like what is sufficient SOL liquidity? Because if I understand this correctly, what you guys are saying, you actually want to minimize the amount of SOL that you have in INF. You want it mostly in LSTs because you want to be earning for INF holders, right? But I mean, you still need to have deep enough, SOL pockets. So like, how are you making that determination, Alkine?
Yes. So, well, first, of course, a lot of our partners rely on INF liquidity for liquidity, so that they don't have to set up random pools on AMMs, or they don't have, because if you want to guarantee SOL liquidity to your users, then you have two options, right? Or at least that was before Infinity. You had the first option was to set up a pool on AMMs, and so you would maintain as the manager of the pool, of the stake pool, you would have to maintain liquidity. So like you would maintain, and Camino does this for example pretty well. So they have like automated votes that get rebalanced. So this is what a lot of the bigger LSTs that are like non-sanctum do on Solana. The most famous example is Jido. So Jido with Jido Sol, they do maintain a lot of Sol liquidity through AMMs. So this is a cost for, you could say, managers, because they have to incentivize a lot of, they have to offer a lot of incentives, so like Jido emissions, so that the strategy of depositing into that pool makes sense, rather than just holding Jido Sol. This is what's called impermanent loss. You can look it up, but it's pretty straightforward. And so they would offer a lot of incentives, which of course is a pretty significant cost. And the other option is to guarantee SOL liquidity in the reserve of the stake pool itself, but that comes at the cost of LPs, so like LST LPs. So if you do this as a manager, of course you don't have to pay for anything, so it's technically free for you. But then your LPs, your users of the LST, they do suffer because they get less APY for their LST. And so this is why INF basically this is the birth of INF. This is why INF was created. It is to allow basically anyone on Solana to create an LST, and as long as you launch with Sanctum, then you can tap into the liquidity of Infinity, and at very preferential rates. And so to reply to your question, how do we know what's good enough liquidity, what's deep enough liquidity for INF? Of course, since a lot of our partners rely on this liquidity, then it's good to have a set number, so like a fixed number of SOL that we should maintain. And then we can like play around depending on market conditions, of course, to even like further improve the yield for INF LPs. But it depends on a lot of factors. So like right now, usually it's actually pretty funny. It depends on DeFi integrations. It depends on on market conditions, of course. But for example, if the price of Sol goes up, then you would expect that a lot of people will like deposit like FOMO in and deposit in, Sol into LSTs. Actually, it's the other way around. A lot of people tend to take profits and then they unstake from LSTs. And so usually we see like more swap volume to infinity when the Sol tends to go up. So with all that knowledge, you can like play around the numbers, but just a little bit, so that you can, optimize the yield for INF LPs. But you need to be very careful. And so usually we have a fixed number, so to like cushion the demand for Sol liquidity just in case. And then we, depending on a bunch of factors, we optimize further. Yeah.
Yeah. So James, thank you so much for that explanation, Alkine. I'm wondering, James, like since you've joined and you've been leading INF, how have you looked at the liquidity situation for Sol within INF and that kind of question of optimizing for yield? Is there any new insights that you've made in your time, working on it? Or I'm just curious, like how do you see that kind of puzzle?
The first thing I realized was it's actually way more complicated than I previously anticipated. It's just you literally have to figure out ways to predict the future. A perfect example of this was on the 10th of October. You had that massive flash crash on Binance, and it like all the markets just nuked, and it was just you could never have predicted that. Okay, like couldn't have predicted that was going to happen on that specific date. Well, what happened was that caused a huge depeg for Binance Sol, which is an LST. Okay. Now, Binance Sol, it's basically what happened was it was trading at different to the value of Sol within it. A lot of people were trying to sell it to get out of Binance Sol, to get into Sol, to, realize their positions and liquidate, and all sorts of cascading events happened. And so what that meant was there was a lot of demand to swap Binance Sol back to unstaked Sol. One of the only venues you could do that was INF. So all of the Sol that was sitting there idle in INF got immediately soaked up by BN Sol. And then we saw this and it was dramatic. Like it was so fast. And then INF didn't have any Sol until the epoch because we have to wait to unstake the next epoch. So then we unstaked a lot more than we normally would. And again, within like a day or less, maybe 12 hours, it was all gone again because there was so much of depeg. There was so much Binance Sol unstaked trying to. And not only that, all of the other LSTs, people were trying to unwind their multiply positions because there was a bit of a panic going on in the market. And it just led to this tremendous amount of demand. I think it must have been maybe 200 or 300,000 Sol that we'd unstaked in a single epoch that was eaten up in no time flat. Like it's a tremendous amount of Sol. The good news for INF LPs, though, is that when somebody comes along and they deposit, say, BN Sol, and they withdraw Sol from INF, they pay a fee for that, okay? And that fee contributes to INF's APY. So one of those epochs that weekend was one of the highest record epochs for INF. So in times of stress, when there's a lot of demand to swap LSTs to Sol, that's when INF does the best. So it was this weird paradox because everything was going down, but INF was like the opposite. It was like going vertical. And so we had one epoch where INF's APY, it actually broke our own chart. The maximum we had on our chart was like 25% of APY for a single epoch. And we did like 26.12% APY in a single epoch because of all of this volume. So anyway, long story short, to answer your question is, it's very hard to predict these things, but that was what I realized very quickly after joining and seeing that myself. But this is something that we are working very hard on optimizing to get even better at trying to predict exactly how much Sol liquidity we will need each epoch based on the conditions of the market and based on what's happening with other LSTs for that epoch.
A bit more of a technical question, and this is just because of my own ignorance. So again, like Alkine was waking up early so that he could make sure that there was enough Sol liquidity in INF. But then you just described a situation in which it seems like you were adding more Sol on the fly for BN Sol within the epoch. So like, does the timing matter? And if it matters, why does it matter?
Oh, yeah, just to be really clear, when that happened and all of the BN Sol rushed into INF to withdraw all the Sol that was there, we can't add more Sol immediately. We have to wait until till the epoch ends. So we have to wait one day, because that's a constraint of the network, right? There's not something all LSTs on Solana, everybody on the network has the same constraint. This is like a fundamental constraint of the network. Solana has these things called epochs. They are 2 days long. And at the end of the epoch is when all of the rewards are distributed. And then you have to wait until the next 2 days before the rewards get distributed again. So what that means is your LST, it doesn't smoothly compound like this, like gradually go up. It actually jumps up every 2 days, like at the epoch boundary, because that's when it's getting the rewards. INF is different, but that's a different story.
But if INF is like a stake pool, INF is a stake pool, right? Or am I retarded? It's not
quite.
Pool?
It looks like it if you squint, which is why people think it's an LST, because it really resembles an LST, but it's actually kind of like an LST of LSTs, like a basket of LSTs.
Okay, but what is it about? And this, man, I should not be asking these questions live, but
so for everyone on the live stream, Eno doesn't look after INF. He works in our LST part of the business and does all sorts of other things. So Eno doesn't have to know this stuff. It's just Alkine and I that need to know this stuff.
No, but I'm okay to use my ignorance as a tool for learning for everybody else. But it's like, what about like I understand that rewards are distributed at the end of an epoch. Like I get that, but I don't understand how that's connected to the ability to add more Sol. Because
at the epoch boundary, that's when you can unstake. So if you go onto your Phantom wallet and you stake to, say, like the Sanctum validator, if you request to unstake, you have to wait until the next epoch boundary to get that stake back. We also have that same constraint. Because it's a constraint, it's a limitation of the network. It's how the network operates, how staking works on Solana. And so for INF, what that means is we have to basically predict for the next 2 days, how much demand do we think there's going to be for the Sol that we have inside of INF? If we're wrong and we underestimated it and it gets taken in the first 12 hours, then we have to wait the remaining 1.5 days before we can get more Sol in there. And where do we get that Sol from? We don't inject that ourselves. We actually have to request to unstake from the LSTs that we hold inside of INF. So that's the delicate balance.
Where I was missing it was the Sol doesn't just magically come from nowhere. Like it comes, you have to unstake first. So I was like, and it's like, and it wouldn't make sense to just inject, Sol from a different address. First of all, I don't even know if that's technically possible. But even if it was, it's like that wouldn't make any sense, right? Because like then you would be increasing the value of INF artificially for what? It's like
this is so interesting. You want to answer it, Archon?
I mean, I was going to say you could technically just add liquidity. So add Sol liquidity to INF, it just means INF. But in a period of massive demand, of course, the Sol is going to get taken out very rapidly. So that wouldn't change anything first. But yeah, I mean, second, that means you need to keep a reserve of naked Sol somewhere to then funnel into INF when it is needed. So that means you still need to, keep somewhere Sol that is raw Sol that you can easily inject into INF. So it's
we have the Sanctum Reserve.
Well, the problem with that though is
we have
Treasury. You could say sitting there. If you just have that Sol sitting there, though, it's not earning for you. This is the problem, right? This is why. This is the fundamental problem that our partners have. Is if they want to incentivize this Sol liquidity for their LST, it's so expensive because they have to have that Sol just sitting there, not earning for them. And that's what Infinity solves. So Alkine getting up at 5 a.m., us trying to figure out how to optimize and predict for the demand. We are doing that for INF, but that's actually solving a core fundamental liquidity problem for all of our partners at Sanctum, all of our LST partners, as well as non-Sanctum LSTs that get to access the liquidity. Can we jump to the fees? Because I want to just touch on this. If we
of course. Yeah, go ahead.
So the fee slide, there should be a fee slide. So this here, okay, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We give in INF, we do all of this work to try and optimize for this liquidity provision for our partners so that their users aren't impacted. The importance of this is if Jupiter's users who have JupeSol, if they try to unstake JupeSol for Sol and they can't, and it's cost them 50% slippage, blah, blah, blah. That's a terrible experience for Jupiter's users, and it actually impacts Jupiter's brand. So for us at Sanctum, it's really important that we optimize INF and make sure we're providing liquidity for Sol liquidity properly so that our partners, their users don't have that experience and that doesn't damage our partners' brands. That's why it's of critical importance. So how do we make sure, to tie it to fees, how do we make sure that our partners get preferential access to the liquidity in INF, right? So this is where the fees come in. So you know how I said there's the lemonade stand and there's Alkine standing behind it, and he's got a clipboard with all the prices that he's willing to accept and the fees that he charges. Well, that clipboard with the fees that we charge is how we do this. So what we do with our clipboard is we've checked for all of the LSTs that we accept in INF, and wherever there's one that isn't for one of our partners, we have a much higher fee to add that to INF. So what that means is it is far more expensive if you're not one of our partners to get access to the Sol liquidity in INF than it is if you are one of our partners. So what it means is in the event of the BN Sol event that we talked about earlier, because we charge a much higher fee, that meant the APY went through the roof for INF. That's because all of those swappers were willing to pay a very high fee to access INF's liquidity. And that's good for INF holders, and that's good for Sanctum to have that because we're providing that for our LPs. But what it also does is it means that if the Jupiter Sol holders, they wanted to swap from JupeSol to Sol, they would get a much cheaper rate and therefore have preferential access to that Sol liquidity versus non-Sanctum LST. So that's like the key thing I wanted to point out here.
Yeah, I mean that just seems like let's completely forget about the dollars and cents, like the business aspect of it, right? That just seems fair to me. That just seems common sense. Like even as an outside observer, I would think to myself, well, like, hey, like if I'm launching an LST with Sanctum, I would expect reasonably, let's say Jupiter, Drift, or Helios, right? I would reasonably expect that, like, hey, man, like you had me work with you folks, and so I would like access to that liquidity piece. That's why I decided to work with you. Obviously, it's going to cost something. It's not free, but we'll obviously want to keep my users happy. Whereas like Binance, we're great friends with Binance, no issues with the team at all. But obviously they decided to go their own way with launching their LST. And also they had a very unique situation in which they needed outside liquidity, ours. So, it just seems fair and makes sense that they would pay a premium for that. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is actually something that we didn't really talk about this much publicly because we didn't think it was that interesting, but maybe this is a better forum for that. And we actually made an upgrade to the INF program, the fee part of the program. And this is the flat slab thing that you can see on screen there. And this is something that we actually did a few weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago now. Basically what it did was it improved the way in which we apply those fees for Sanctum LSTs versus non-Sanctum LSTs. So that we can make sure that our partners are getting the best rates through INF and that they have preferential access to that liquidity. So to me, that's of critical importance because it's why INF exists, to your point, that our partners expect that. And so with this upgrade, we've basically better enforced the rules around that and made it so that it's more expensive for non-Sanctum LSTs and it's as cheap as we can make it, at least for now, for our partners LSTs.
There's a lot of ways in which INF is important to partner LSTs, and you and Alkine have touched very beautifully on the liquidity aspect, right? What I'd now like to do is transition the conversation to the same topic, right? We're still talking about partner LSTs and INF's relation to those partner LSTs, but more in the context of why does INF success also mean partner LST success? I feel like sometimes when I look at the timeline, I look at Twitter, there seems to be this feeling somehow that it's a zero sum game, and somehow if INF wins, that's a net loss for our friends over at Jupiter, and I get a little annoyed with the way that people think about kind of this zero sum thinking on INF success. Like obviously we do intend every little bit to aggressively grow INF, but also I think we feel very strongly internally that is a good thing for everybody, right? So I'd love to get. I think James, you also feel equally passionate about this subject. So would love to get your 2 cents there.
So just for the record, INF right now is around 1.8, maybe just under 2 million SOL staked inside of INF. That's not Sanctum's capital. That's not our SOL. That's the holders of INF SOL. So that's what Alkine was calling LPs. Okay, so that's the size of INF. The size of Jupe SOL right now is like 5 million SOL. So it's like 2.5 times bigger than INF is. And that's just an example. That's just one example of an LST, comparing it to INF. Now, like I said earlier, I think part of that confusion comes from the fact that people think that INF is just an LST, but it's not. It's an LST of LSTs that's role is to enable swaps for other LSTs. It's the shared liquidity layer, which means that Jupiter doesn't have to spend a bunch of money on their own liquidity pool so that their users can swap out of JupeSol. INF solves for that. It not only solves that for Jupiter, but it solves it for Drift, and it solves it for Bybit, and it solves it for all of the other partners and all of the other LSTs on the network. So that's why INF is actually of a net benefit to all LSTs on Solana, because it gives this shared liquidity that any of them and their users can tap into without those teams who run those LSTs spending the money to create that liquidity pool for themselves. Now, why is it important that INF succeeds for our partners? Well, the bigger INF gets, it means the more SOL we can unstake to provide to our partners when they need it for their users. If INF was really small, we wouldn't have been able to service. Like, let's say INF was like 200,000 SOL. We would not have been able to service all of the swap demand when there was that big DPEG weekend on the 10th of October. There would have been a lot of Jupiter Sol holders who were waiting weeks to unstake their Jupe Sol, potentially. If they were going to Jupiter and doing the routing through the front end UI, it could have taken a while, and it also would have been very expensive for them. And so this is why, from my perspective, it is of strategic importance for Sanctum to grow INF properly and make it as good as we can, and also to optimize the fees so that it's best for our partners, so that we can reach a point where we can basically service, all of our partners' swap demand every epoch as their users need with INF. So they never have to bootstrap any of that liquidity for themselves. But what I would also like to say is it's actually not to INF's benefit for INF to win outright. It's like INF needs to be big enough, but it doesn't need to be the biggest. It's actually kind of better if it's pretty big, but not the biggest, because what that means is it's able to keep servicing those swaps every epoch by giving out this unstaked SOL for swappers as they need it. It can earn maximal fees for the holders of INF token whilst enabling all of those other LSTs to survive and thrive, because there's this liquidity pool called INF that they can all tap into. So I actually see it as quite synergistic, but I think without this understanding that INF is actually this liquidity pool that allows swaps for LSTs, it could be easy to see INF as a threat to other LSTs, but I don't see it that way at all. INF couldn't exist without the other LSTs.
I see. And speaking of doing the best that we can for yield, this is where I'd love to get Alkine's take, especially since he has so much historical context here. How would you describe INF's performance today? Like obviously we're seeing initiatives like SIMD 411 to double the rate of disinflation from 15 to 30%. So we can reasonably expect an acceleration of or deceleration. How do you want to phrase that? But anywho, we're going to be seeing less and less inflation rewards, obviously, for validators. People who have been paying attention to earlier in the stream might have even noticed that James was commenting on a graphic of INF yield and saying, "Oh my God, those numbers are so out of date." So yeah, Alkine would love to get your perspective on INF's performance within that context.
Well, I think this is actually one of James' favorite line. I think since we started to actively work on INF, it's been just outperforming every single LST out there. So yeah, there is no second best. Is that what Sailor says? There's no second best. And yeah, and actually, I think even like the proposal of this like decreasing the network inflation rate and stuff. Actually, I am on the contrarian view of I think it's going to benefit INF in a way because the trading, so like the trading APY component of the INF APY, because remember it's made of the staking, of the base staking APY of all the combined LSTs in INF, and also the trading fees. And so the trading fee component is going to represent probably a bigger like number as the network inflation goes down of like the total INF APY. And so I think INF will stand out even more in the future as an LST. I shouldn't say LST, but like liquid staking derivative, you could say. Yeah, I mean it's going to get better than the others. That is my contrarian view. I don't know if it's correct. We'll see. But I think it's not going to be too bad for INF.
So actually, that's another thing I'd like to challenge you guys on. And like I do buy the contrarian view that you're presenting here, which is that like as a total percentage, the amount of yield coming from LST to LST swaps, or even like LST to just swaps, right? From and to LSTs, will represent a larger share of the yield, and so therefore, like INF will outperform in that sense because inflation yield will have decreased significantly. However, what I do question is this. I mean, okay, sure, like LST to Sol swaps, like that makes sense, right? But like I feel like LSTs are quite sticky. And of course, I think Alkine's correct that, and he has the actual experience here to be able to say with authority that like people tend to unstake from LSTs when they're trying to take profit, right? But that's the question still remains to me, like, what do LST to SWOL swaps or LST to LST swaps look like going forward, right? Does a mature Solana that has a bunch of people trading it, um, like do earlier holders of LST take profits, and now we need a new generation of people to take on and grow the LST ecosystem? Are we expecting this growth to be more led by institutions instead, and so retail stake into LSTs is going to be negligible by comparison? I'm asking you to predict a future that you don't know, but would love to. I mean, because INF's primary edge is this swap fee that we're getting either from LST to LST or LST to Sol. It just kind of seems obvious to me that we should be asking this question of like, well, then what does that market for swaps look like? I don't have that answer. I'm just curious what you guys probably think about this in your sleep. So
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, I think it's purely a factor of LST adoption on the network, and so right now I don't know what the latest like numbers are, but maybe like 11 to 12% of the total stake is liquid, something like that. I don't think it's much more than this. So there is still like a long way to go. And as this number goes up, because it will inevitably go up, in my opinion, of course, I'm biased, but we are actually doing our best to increase the LST adoption. We are giving through INF, we are giving like better liquidity, so it's like easier to justify launching an LST for like anyone. For users to get users get better execution. So all in all, it's actually it's a good choice. I mean, first of all, you should stake your Sol. It doesn't matter if it's like native or liquid. But yeah, liquid staking is only going to get more and more dominant, in my opinion. And so as the total percentage of liquid staking goes up, then of course the demand for Sol liquidity and LST to LST swaps will also go up. and so I don't think it's worth like indexing on oh my god the network, like the APY is going to go down because of this proposal that's probably going to pass. Oh my god, the multiply strategies are going to be less interesting. I think it's so. I mean, right now you could say that the APY is of course very high, so it's harder. So it's easier to justify like opening a multiply position on Camino or on Juplend. Um, but it's also, I mean, we are also very used to like seeing this high APY. I think for staking Sol. I mean, 7%. It's actually very high. We can all agree that maybe it should be lower. And so as it goes lower, I think people will just get used to the new number and multiply. Now it's maybe yielding 30% on Juplend, and maybe in the future is going to be only 10%. When once if you can only get like 2 or 3% through native staking, and you can get like 10% doing multiply, of course it's going to be much better as well. So I don't think it's going to like change the demand for LST2 Sol swaps all that much. And I don't think it's going to change the usage and the demand for LST or liquid staking in DeFi either. Actually, I think all of this is going to mature very much with like when we scale the network, when we increase the LST adoption, when we do like more educational content. So yeah, I think it's we still have a very long way to go.
James, we're gonna wrap this up just about now, and so I'd love to give you any closing thoughts or statements, or perhaps even questions that you wish I had asked. Even though I feel like I've just about exhausted all about my INF questions for tonight.
No, I get it. I get it. We basically live and breathe this Arcana at the moment. So, what I would say is the only thing we didn't touch on is looking forward, like looking ahead. And I think, like, watch this space. We have been. I mean, look, to be honest, like when I joined and FP said, I want you to look at INF, and then, Alkine and I mapped everything out, and we kind of explored, what could the future of INF actually look like. We've kind of painted a roadmap ahead, and our engineering team is hard at work on some upgrades to INF right now to make it even better than it is. So we've got a lot of plans. INF has just been this, like, I guess, public good for a long time. But I don't believe, in my opinion, I don't think it's had the love that it deserves. INF LPs have had a really good time. They've made it. INF has been the best place to grow your Sol, and it remains the best place to grow Sol on Solana. But there is so much we can do to make it even better than it is, and even more performant than it has been. And that's all of that is what we're working on at the moment. So there's big things coming for INF. It is the best place to grow your Sol. It will continue to be the best place to grow your Sol. And so regardless of network inflation and debates about, the future of the network, we believe in the network. We believe liquid staking is going to continue to grow and that INF is going to be a key part of that story. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Man, let's give a big round of applause over to James Hanley and Alkine. Claps over here. Just imagine it, and the crowd goes wild. So.
And shout out to James for staying up this late. It's
12:30 a.m.
Yeah,
it's 12:30 a.m. But he's been a very good sport about it. So, James, I really do appreciate you accommodating us. For this call. Alkine, screw you and your European time zone. You guys have the best time zone to work in crypto. we here over in Asia and Australia have to eat crap every single day, but I think James definitely has it the worst. But obviously, this has been. I think we should just do an INF podcast. Just literally call it Infinity. That seems like that would be a lot more fun than listening to me yammer about various topics. But anywho, I've actually really enjoyed today. It's been a while since I've enjoyed a talk like this online because the talks tend to be very superficial and just very promotionally, which is like, oh my god, we just launched the thing, and like, yes, I am very excited and happy for you, but I'd rather have the substantive discussion, and we had it today. So James, Alkine, again, thank you so much for your time. Any last words, Alkine, James? Any last things? All right, well, thanks, lads. Really appreciate you.
Good to see
you,
some familiar names in the chat here. Thanks, everyone.
Yes. All right, so we're gonna be kicking these bozos off the street, and we're gonna close out with a few things what to expect on the Sanctum calendar. We will keep this short and sweet. Number one, over at Breakpoint, we are a official coffee sponsor for Breakpoint. So if you're trying to get caffeinated, please come to Breakpoint early. We are obviously going to be serving Raposa coffee. You can see a Coops over here. Coops is the NFT mascot of the folks that are running Raposa. And I think it's also its own standalone community. But anywho, the Raposa coffee folks make really, really good stuff. So Breakpoint is in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates on December 11th to 13th. And again, you can get caffeinated on us. We also have a side event. All community members are welcome. If you would like to join Drinks by the Circuit, then you can apply here on this QR code. So I don't know who's going to be coming to Breakpoint, but I'd really, really love for you folks to meet us. And if you can't make it to Drinks by the Circuit, but you would like to do something substantive, I really encourage you to join this product keynote by our fearless leader, FP Lee. He is coming out of his cave, done writing essays and setting direction and pushing the team and negotiating deals and flying all around the world and talking to Forward Industries, all that jazz, to give you a very wonderful talk that is going to reveal a new product that we're working on. And I don't think I can say anything more than that. And so we have something that we would love to announce and tell you all. And obviously, if we could meet you folks in person, that would actually mean a lot to me. Me personally, I think FP would be greatly pleased. Making him sound like a North Korean dictator over here. No, he'd be very happy. And I know James and Alkine also, the entire Sanctum team, will be flying out over to Abu Dhabi. So we would love to see you there. And would be great to to have everybody as a family just kind of on the lock-in stage and cheering him on and hearing all the great things that we have going on, especially for 2026, because we're taking some big swings. And of course, if you don't want to miss another forecast, all you got to do is scan this QR code, and we will see you on the next one. Subscribe to all future events on our Luma. We obviously have all those other events that we talked about here, so you can scan this QR code. And of course, we love you all. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Adios.